The media's role in a democracy, you can say, can be compared to that of an umpire, since we are in the mood for cricket and we've been discussing. What happens, though, when players begin targeting the umpire, or when the umpire shows bias or is bribed to make decisions? This is the situation that the media in South Asia, indeed media everywhere in the world, faces right now. Our next session decodes this changing face of the media and entertainment and its role in shaping our society. May I invite the moderator for this session, Mr. Riz Khan.
The changing face of media and the entertainment industry. The panelists are Roland Schatz, founder and CEO of Media Tenor International, a global leader in strategic media analysis. In 2008, he was appointed Global Media Expert to the UN Alliance of Civilizations. Nayla Al Khaja, the first female film director and producer in the United Arab Emirates. CEO of Nayla Al Khaja Films, she is also the founder of The Scene, Dubai's first film club. She has written and directed several award-winning films.
Vicky Kapur, Executive Editor, Khaleej Times. He is responsible for editorial operations and strategy at Khaleej Times. Has 25 years of experience with some of the best-known media companies in South Asia.
Nayla, Roland, Vicky, come on up. It's so strange. I'm used to actually standing for most of the sessions I moderate, but they've put me out of striking distance, and I'll sit down and join you guys. Please grab a seat. Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's really interesting how the media is perceived. I remember someone saying, you know, in the West, the story gets distorted. And actually, it's interesting because the term fake news didn't exist until quite recently, and I'm hearing strange things like fake facts, manufactured facts. They doesn't make sense to me with these oxymoronic statements. But there was a story of a young man walking through Central Park one evening, and he saw this elderly lady being attacked by a dog that just was running around on its own. And so he went and shooed off the dog, and he scared the dog away. And the elderly lady said, "Thank you so much, young man, thank you." She was so happy because she was scared, you know, the dog attacked her. So a local reporter in New York from a newspaper found out, and he tracked down this man. He said, "I heard what happened. You were so brave. You tackled this dog that was attacking the elderly lady in the park in New York here. You know, I can see the headline. Let's do a story on this. I can see the headline. You know, local man saves senior citizen from dog attack in Central Park." He said, I'm not local. I don't live in New York." "Oh, don't worry. I see the headline now. American hero tackles stray dog in park and saves elderly lady." He said, "Actually, I'm not really American either. I'm actually from the Middle East. I'm studying here." And of course, the headline the next day said, "Local dog attacked by Arab terrorist in New York." So the story can be twisted, as you know. We're going to look at the changing face of media and entertainment because I think it's become evident over the years how the scene has changed. A lot of things have had an impact on the way we work in the media. Technology, when I started out at the BBC, the first crew I went out with was a film crew. And they told me, "Go and write your script. You've got an hour and a half while we develop the film." And I was like, and then of course video came. Now it's live news, breaking news, everything. So we've got a very distinguished panel here with whom we can discuss these various developments over the years and where we're going with the media and the entertainment industry. I'm going to start with Nayla, whom I've known for a while here in the Middle East, having started pioneering actually as a female producer and director in the Gulf, in Dubai, with filmmaking. And I want to start really because what's interesting is we're seeing over the years how certain cross films, if you like, come out, the collaborations, Indian movies that have been filmed half in England and so on. But the Gulf is still an area where filmmaking is still quite rare. Why is that?
Wow, you had to put me in the deep end. How do I say this diplomatically?
I think you put yourself in the deep end by becoming a film director in the Middle East.
Yeah, so basically it's a fantastic question. It's about infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure. And I think for us to create the snowball effect, we need to first of all, it has to come from a federal level. It has to come way up high, where the UAE as a country should start signing co-treaties with other countries. So that way I could do a co-production, for instance, with India or Pakistan or any other country in the world where I can now co-produce films with them. That will obviously incentivize people to take advantage of tax rebates and so forth. But there are a lot of seeds, Riz Khan, that needs to be planted, and not just on a federal level. Because right now when people say, oh, you have a film industry in the UAE, I'm like, no, it's actually a film movement. For us to have a film industry, a fantastic example would be Cape Town as a benchmark, for instance. Cape Town had a lot of films and they shadow their own talent. Obviously, a lot of Cape Townians. In the UAE, we have the challenge or the GCC of having a lot of transient culture where people come and go. So for me, if you ask me, Cape Town was great because they had a tipping point where they did the series Black Sails. So for now you have 9 months where people are working and it just generated a lot of income. Last year, it was announced that Cape Town itself generated $1 billion towards their film industry. And I don't see why we can't replicate that model and do something that suits the climate of the UAE itself.
I know there have been efforts to try to grow the film industry here. Of course, I was here when the Dubai Film Festival launched, for example.
And that's closed now.
Yeah, and so this is a sad thing. We've seen some progress and some regress. But I want to ask you about technology. Because one of the things, we saw your baby picture go up there. I saw you in there going, ah. But the glamorous picture of you with your Canon C camera, yes. Which it's a series I also film with. Yes. Technology has changed and it's made filmmaking very accessible. How has that affected what you can and can't do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole meltdown of analog, as we knew it once upon a time when Kodak, their logo dropped down. It was a hard day for everyone.
Kodak.
I know.
Remember Kodak?
How old am I? But the whole democratization of media by making everything digital. So obviously, Canon really was as you say, the leader in the industry, where they created these cameras where the look and feel looked professional. But then what was different that everybody had access to those gear. To the gear that they provided. That means, more content was generated, but the question is the relevant or good content is being generated. So as I said earlier, going back to our previous conversation, so when we are planting the seed needs to be planted in education of cinema and media, again, on the federal level of co-treaties, and more importantly, to shadow the local talent. Everything needs to be homegrown. So when we are bringing films to the UAE, or we are making those films, the money absolutely needs to be spent here so that the workforce can be, can benefit. And then the snowball effect will start to happen. One last thing, I know you want to say, but this is very, very important. Every other country I know, even the ones that don't have much infrastructure, have something called a film grant. Now, I say this with all my heart because I really, really believe that if we do have a government film grant and we greenlight 4 feature films a year, then I wouldn't have to go to Berlin and Venice and all these big festivals and not see a film from the GCC. But the country that will change everything and that will, mark my words, would be KSA. I love the kids there. They don't take themselves too seriously. They know how to make films and they have population.
That's really interesting.
That's going to change everything, the population there. And they're all Saudis, and that's going to be such a game changer. And you remember, I met you in Switzerland a few years ago, and we all said this, that the biggest piece of the cake is missing. And now that's being shoved in the cake, there'll be something for everyone to eat.
I'm going to get back to Saudi Arabia, because that really is a little bomb you dropped in there. I'm going to get to Vicky here on the technology, though, because newspapers have seen a very painful time over the last few years. And, of course, there had to be an evolution. Because papers can go online where suddenly audio and video content can come in. So you're evolving. But let me know, as you've seen the past decade, what have been the biggest challenges for the newspaper industry?
We all understand that content is important and content will always remain important. But the fact remains that the digital platform moving in has completely changed the game in terms of the way the content is presented. So newspapers, traditionally have been a very serious kind of offering, a platform where you're giving the reader something to think about. The digital platform comes in, and then you got cats in the jar, for instance, and stuff on YouTube, and they're taking the interest of the reader away. So it's not that content becomes less important, but what content is being offered to everybody over there, what the readers are interested in reading and watching becomes different. Newspapers, in that sense, did not evolve. We're still the same format. we put ink on paper, and we distribute it to you first thing in the morning at your home. But what happens during the rest of the day? Those newspapers have not been able to. So we need our cats in the jar, for instance. You know, we need to figure out how can we deliver content that you need at a time that you need it, or at a time that you have free to read the newspaper.
So when I was training at the BBC in the late 80s, I was sent on one of my attachments, my internships, to a place called CFAX. Do you remember? Does anyone remember CFAX? CFAX was on TV. It was basically very poor quality digital paper, print if you like, on screen. You could switch it on from your remote control. And I remember the editor of CFAX saying to me, this is the fastest way to get news right now, because we update every few minutes or whatever. So this is where you get your information first, which was true, because in those days we had appointment viewing. You had to watch the news at 1 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock on ITN. So that was an interesting thing. Now you face a challenge, because the romantic, let's get up and have the paper with a coffee in the morning, it is romantic as an idea, but it's not.
It is still romantic, but it's not for the kids who are growing up, or for the younger generation who actually have already seen the news or read the news or watched the news the day before, whatever you're going to publish over there. So in a sense, newspapers have evolved into viewspaper. You know, if you look at the New York Times, there's hardly any news that you'll find over there, but lots of opinion, lots of views that they present over there. That's a great niche to be in. You know, for instance, you know, for the thinking person, for the thinking audience, but that's a great audience to have. If you don't have that audience, then you're missing out on something, and therefore, you know, as a newspaper, you need to evolve into a different domain, into a different dimension. You need to come up with something that your audience needs. That is the big question.
I'm going to try to come back also to the issue of paying for something online, because there's just an inherent reluctance, as you know. So let's get back to that in a second. Roland, I want to welcome you in. And Roland, again, is an old friend I met when I was launching Al Jazeera English many years ago. One of the things that intrigues me, Roland, is you actually look at the metrics. So if people say, they're not really doing this, or they're doing this, you actually have the information where you can say, no, here's the empirical evidence that this is how it is. What's happened in the way people perceive what's going on with the media?
Well, I think the moment we understand the main point, what media is about, we will probably get very quickly to the solution. It's all about relevance, right? And how can you be relevant when all you are obsessed about is who is first, who's the fastest? You can no longer be relevant when speed is your driving force. Having said this, I prepared data and I can't show them here, but the best TV is in your head, so if you all close your eyes for a moment and you try to think, what is the main subject India was framed? Not in India, but in BBC, in German TV, in French TV, in American TV, in Chinese TV. What was the #1 theme over the last 10 years? You need to close your eyes. You can't watch at me if you try to think of this one theme. What was the one topic India was framed the most from 2008 to 2018? Was it cricket? No. Was it your wonderful military? No. It was rape. Does rape really represent India? What was the #1 theme Pakistan over the last 10 years? Terror attacks. What was the #1 theme? And I can go on and you immediately understand what I'm talking about. Now, what you can do is you can blame me. I'm a representative of journalists. I'm a 5th-generation journalist. That we get it wrong. That we don't know how to do our job. And maybe in parts it's right. But as we know, it always takes two to tango. So, as we are here at this wonderful conference from We Are One World, what have you done as people from India? What have you done as people from Pakistan? What have you done as people from the Southeast Asia region to tell my colleagues your story, what you are working on and what makes you tick?
Roland, let me challenge you on that. There is obviously the information that you're asking, how have you told your story? There is also the issue of how lazy journalists at the other end might be in terms of what they look for in the story, or how they retrieve that information or get that information.
You're right, but I try to, for a moment, let the audience learn what they can do.
Okay.
Because that we are lazy, I think we were always lazy. It's part of our job, being a journalist, right? But what can you do to help lazy people like me and him change the selection? Because we are the ones sitting at our desk, and that makes us lazy. Because we are not per se bad people. The fact that we can be lazy is that we have 100, 200, 300 fascinating stories on our desk. I no longer need to leave my room to create what maybe others think that is a fascinating newspaper, that is a fascinating evening program, that is fascinating social media. But that is not relevance. And it is not getting us to the reality. What I said earlier on, the number one theme of India, the number one theme of Pakistan, we can all agree, yes, these things happen, but they are not giving the full picture. And that leads us to problem number 2. Why are people no longer trusting us? Because what we put on front page, what we air in the evening news, hopefully it is correct, but it max shows 10% of reality. And the moment you buy the newspaper, the moment you switch on television, the moment you go online to us, the media, you expect that we give you the full picture. And the fact that speed, back to our first moment, that speed was the driving force, that we no longer were thinking what is relevant and what is not relevant, led us to a world where we are no longer getting what we need. The beautiful thing is that we are not alone in this race of losing trust. Ask politicians, ask religious leaders, how full is the cathedral, how full is the church, how full is the mosque in every city? We are together in this race of getting the people back into the mosque, into the parliaments, into the media rooms. And the good solution, surprise, surprise, is existing as well. The United Nations has developed not as United Nations, but as work from everybody in every country, from every stakeholder community in every country. They developed over 6 years a plan which they call the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And they said, how about if we make this the new reality for the people in India, for the people in Maldives, for the people in Germany? And this plan was an accepted plan, and now all of a sudden, we, the journalists, have something where we can orient on, where we can know this is actually relevant, and this is what interests the audience. So this gives us time back. We no longer have to be in this race of who has fake news the first, but who's providing value.
I'll come back to that because that's a very important point. I wanted to get back to Nayla and talk about how entertainment has blurred into the information area and how information has blurred into entertainment. I mean, people are more concerned about what the Kardashians are doing now than actually getting news, for example. And yet, interestingly enough, the cinematic industry, the film industry, Michael Moore was one of those who helped build this appeal for documentary films that were informative. One thing I wonder is how that affects your approach to filmmaking. I remember, to name drop, I interviewed Oliver Stone, and one of the questions I asked him was, you take a lot of trouble to set your shots up. He was known for, like Apocalypse Now, all these, taking so much trouble to set up the shot. And I said, now people are watching you on a 6-inch screen. How do you feel about that? And he said, I hate it.
Well, you'll be lucky if you get 6 inches these days.
No, exactly.
Even
that's a big
smaller,
screen. You're right. So,
yeah.
so that's why I'm wondering, when everything is pushed through the small screen and people's attention spans are smaller, how does that affect what you do?
You know, as human beings, I think that's the one thing that will always vibrate inside us is we have this innate, well, most of us who have taste, I would say, would have this innate feeling to understand what's a grabbing story. So whether you see it on a small screen, on a big screen, it might be controversial. I really don't mind. I think you, as a narrative, like as a person who wants to tell a story, you don't worry about how people are going to see that. That's their duty. You know, that's not your job. Your job is to make sure you are true to yourself, to the story, and tell the best, give the best picture possible.
But how you frame it makes a difference.
Well, you'll frame it the way you frame it, right? You have if you're going to go to technicalities, whether it's the ratio of the framing, whether I'm shooting on, I meant more on how because something, I hate the fact when they jog cameras around to try and create an effect of it being dynamic, because the human eye doesn't work like that, actually, but that's meant to create an effect, and it drives me nuts. Well, now what you're saying is like a menu of food, right? You can have people who like the McDonald's, and then you can have people who like the sashimi. So really, it really depends on the array. So you can go from an extreme art house films to, very commercial Hollywood films to super independent films and the shaky ones that a lot of people actually find interesting.
Some aspects are good.
Yeah, so there's something for everyone. Yeah. But what I'm saying here, which goes back to your kind of links to what you were saying, is that there's a narrative that's not told. I know that there are thematics, there are themes like, what's the thing that you remember about India the last 10 years? And I'm thinking, what are the things that I remembered about my side of the world here? Whether it's, the GCC as a whole, or the Levant area, or the Middle East as a whole. And it goes back to the same thing. I just feel that in my core, there are a lot of stories that are not told. And I absolutely believe that's our job to do that. And we have to find, and for me, obviously, it's the medium in film, because film is so powerful. Today, a lot of people are influenced by Hollywoodism. I mean, it's a term because of, the jeans you wear today or the yellow cabs. We know it through 100 years of cinema. Today language is so powerful. I speak a bit of, my rusted Urdu because of watching lots of Bollywood films. And I'm just hoping that once KSA wakes up with their screens, I'm believing it's going to be 600 in 5 years, that's just going to open Pandora's box. They will now be able to see stories from our side of the world to the other side. And that's going to be a big bounce of tennis ball. It won't be some little ripple. It will be a tsunami, I hope. I really do hope that. Because of the time restraints, I'm going to ask Vicky to touch on that subject that I was talking about, is how do we persuade people, how do we monetize the media now? Because people, when they expect everything online to be free. Come on, keep going. They'll go.
That's a sad part, that you need to think about monetization. Journalists now need to think about monetization rather than, when I started my career, we were put in a building where they were all journalists, the sales guys. We didn't know who the sales guys were. There were Chinese walls between us and them, for instance. That's no longer there. Now, editors, journalists need to think of creative concepts, and they need to create stories that can be monetized. But is that the best thing for the audience? That's the question that we have to ask. If we do not monetize things, then we can't be in it for the long. Yeah. So obviously we need to monetize things. So yes, before digital came in, it was the editor that decided this is what you're going to read tomorrow morning, and that's it. And you get that paper, and you get that news story. Today, with the digital thing over there, you understand that these stories are popular, and the rest of them are not popular, and therefore, what the reader is already clicking on becomes more important, and then you try to feed that. And what you're doing is that maybe those are frivolous stories, but you go on doing that because that's what the audience wants. And then you may be missing out on some very important stories because they're not clicking on those. Now, you have to draw the line over there. Is this monetizable or is that monetizable? Because this they're getting free in any case, and therefore they're clicking. If you were to charge for this, they're probably not going to pay for it. They're still going to probably pay for that. So in that sense, you need to understand what the audience wants and what they need, and then probably give them what they need.
I don't envy you in that position. We're so short of time, Roland. I'm going to ask you to wrap it up with your response to that, and also ask, from the perspective, we're guests of WION today, how does it set itself up as a channel, as the global channel out of India? What's needed to give it that oomph?
Yeah, maybe just to add on the question regarding the value and the money, it's getting back to the question of relevance. For us, it's very clear that you have to pay a different price for a Maserati than you pay for a Mercedes A-Class, than you pay for a Volkswagen Golf. We all know this. But are we so aware whether we should pay more money for a text which is published in the FT than in Le Monde or in a boulevard paper? We no longer know this. How come? Because there's hardly any difference between a text published in the FT, in Le Monde, or in the boulevard paper. We are all the same. The moment we publish all the same, we declare news all the same, You know what we did? We forgot our audience. Nobody would walk into the office of the CEO of Maserati and tell the guy who builds the Maserati, hey, I'm the one who is producing Volkswagen Golf. I sell 1 million. You are doing everything wrong. Follow my path, how to do a Golf, and then you sell 1 million Maseratis. Nobody would ever do that, because there's the difference between Maserati and there's a difference between Golf, and it is absolutely wrong to say we should no longer have a Golf or everybody should drive a Maserati, right? But when it comes to news, when it comes to my profession, we have the impression it's all the same, and it's all about these big numbers. Remember the original joke, how this session started? The Muslim dog?
Yeah.
Why is this joke a joke? Because we in the West have the impression that if we cover Islam or Muslims, we can only cover them among one topic, which is related to terror, right? That's the only topic around this religion. There's something wrong which we are doing, and the way back to where we come from, where we could rely on journalism, was that we had on one hand publishers and we had editors-in-chief who would say, hey, wait a minute, is this story really relevant, or is this just because you think all the others are running the same story? We need to get back to where we were by having the courage to be different, and that is what I would say, for we are one world, but this one world through the eyes of India, WION, is make sure that we can understand from where you come, but give the rest of the world as well room and space. We spent today a lot of time talking about terror attacks. And I come from a country, and we talk about state terror attack. I'm a German. I don't have to tell you a lot. My family paid a high price from what the Nazis did. But we had terror attacks later on as well. But if you try to Google terror in Germany, you hardly find a story. And we didn't manage to get to this situation because we gave too much visibility to the terrorists, to the Red Army faction. We learned that a terrorist can no longer be a terrorist if he's no longer finding sympathy groups around them. We dried this sympathy climate away. So nobody could be proud by saying, I'm a terrorist in Germany. And that was what I had hoped when Gerhard Schröder was hugging Mr. Bush after 9/11, that he would told him that experience, that he was holding him very strongly and say, in a moment you get wounded like 9/11, don't even think that you are able to make a good judgment. Listen to your friends who were in the same situation as you were and ask them, what have you done? That there is no more terror. Learn from this, and we journalists are part of this. As long as we give terrorists front page photos, as long as we give terrorists this visibility, we create 100 additional suicide bombers. Because I know from my work, which I developed for the World Economic Forum, on how to fight terror, how to create better understanding among cultures, it is all about visibility, understanding, and tolerance, and we need to get back to that.
Right. Listen, there's a lot to discuss, but unfortunately we don't have any more time, so I want to get a big round of applause for our panelists for taking on this topic as well. There is so much to discuss, and I wish we had a little more time to do this. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you all. Lots of food for thought there in that conversation. And with that, we've come to an end of the Global Summit, the first edition of the Global Summit, or should I say the beginning of a series of such summits. You've all been a fabulous audience. Thank you very much for your patience and your participation. And I'm going to invite you all to join us for drinks and dinner. Thank you.